Hi, and welcome to the Future of Smart Cities by CM Industrial. During this week-long webinar series, we plan to find out how smart cities will impact the future of the industries that we serve as a talent solution provider. I'm today's host, Indri, and on this webinar sponsored by This Week in FM, we are talking about how to create fully autonomous buildings with AI. To discuss this, I'm joined by an expert panel of well-established smart building leaders. Before we get there introduced, just a quick reminder that we will be running a live question and answer later on. So if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat and we'll try our best to address them. Anyway, let's get started. Would you like to introduce yourselves and the companies? And shall we start with Katie?
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning, everyone. I'm Katie Whipp and I'm head of Deepki UK. In terms of a bit of background to myself, I've been in the real estate space for nearly 15 years with roles specifically within the asset management and property management space. In terms of Deepki partners with its global commercial real estate clients to accelerate the environmental transition of their real estate portfolios to net zero. We achieve this via our end-to-end ESG proposition, which is a combination of technology, data, and ESG experts.
Lovely. What about you, Abel?
Good morning, everyone. Abel Samaniego here, founder and CEO of DABBEL AI. With DABBEL, we bring something that is very necessary to tackle this climate crisis that we have in front of us. Basically, it's a software that sits on top of your current energy systems in buildings, and we can save you up to 30% in energy consumption, but also in CO2 with some kind of frictionless. So trying to use your current or legacy equipment in your commercial buildings in a much more efficient way.
Lovely. And we've got Will as well.
Also, good to meet you, everyone. Good morning. So I'm Will Brouwer. I'm the product manager for SmartScore. SmartScore is a global certification for smart buildings, one of two certifications from WiredScore, which assesses digital connectivity and smart buildings across over 160 cities and 3,000 plus buildings globally.
Lovely. So yeah, let's probably start about our topic. So we are obviously talking about artificial intelligence in smart buildings, and I was really interested and excited to talk about this. So to start with, maybe Will, what do you think? What is AI? I mean, what is the difference between smart buildings and artificial intelligence autonomous buildings theoretically?
Sure. So maybe I'll start by answering, what is AI and then what is a smart building? And then maybe like open it up onto the panel. I guess when we're thinking about artificial intelligence, we're thinking about, machine intelligence and, artificial intelligence is that broad domain. It's a very broad domain. I guess today, specifically within artificial intelligence, we're thinking about machine learning and deep learning as a type of that, which is all about how these algorithms can use data to deliver a specific outcome. And all artificial intelligence today is narrow in its domain, meaning it requires like a human to define an objective. So it's just when we're thinking about AI, we're not thinking about these like scary apocalyptic movies in the future. We're thinking about a very specific algorithm that uses data to deliver a certain outcome defined by a human.
Mm-hmm. And
the
also,
second part of that, sorry. Can I?
No, you go.
I was saying the second part is then when we ask about what is a smart building. So this was a question we answered when defining SmartScore, our smart building certification, which we worked on with the world's leading landlords, and together we came to the conclusion that a smart building should be defined by outcomes. So we defined a smart building as a building that delivers outcomes to meet the needs and expectations of all users of that space. So specifically, a smart building is sustainable, cost efficient, future-proof, and provides that experience. And I think just at one point I'll add before opening up to the other panelists is there was almost too much frivolous debate around the differences between smart, intelligent, autonomous, when really what we focus on here, we're focusing on a building's ability to deliver outcomes. And one of the ways it can deliver on those outcomes is now through like new applications with this artificial intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. So Abel, obviously you're working quite a lot with artificial intelligence. So how much is AI developed right now in the smart buildings?
Thanks. So in general, I think I completely agree. I will take the word from Will. So we have AI is a very broad field, and we have adapted this to the building itself, this definition of how far we are at the end. We all have to remind ourselves, as we can read everywhere, right? Like we should not think on features, we should think on benefits, right? On what do we really need, and as it was also Will was telling. So at the end is how do we apply the current technologies and how we develop them to adapt to the buildings to get the outcome. Then now what we need is exactly what also Will very well mentioned, and this was we are doing, we are specialized on that, trying to go right now, especially on the current stock of buildings that we have, using the current legacy equipment and putting the AI algorithms that are able to use the same machine, the same mechanical equipment in a much more efficient way. How? This AI, we want to put it, is just the ability to really be able to sense the space, to feel the space, to learn about it, and then has a productive outcome. Mm-hmm. That's basically the translation. Nobody, I think we are not right now in some kind of panel about which algorithms are we using, right? So so that would be the main outcome that I see, and very clustered and very defined on very specific on the building environment.
Yeah, perfect. So let's talk more about artificial intelligence right now in smart buildings. So obviously the first point we need of data. How much data do we need for the building to be more autonomous than it was maybe previously? Katie, maybe you would like to talk about this.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think when it comes to AI, data is integral, right? So AI learns its patterns, learns the ability to take on tasks previously computed by humans by understanding data sets. So I think before you get started, it's really important to recognize that really bad data leads to bad AI technology. And I think that's a really important element to consider. But I think equally as well is the fact that too much data also lends itself to AI struggling because it's not able to create the patterns, the structures it needs in order to learn the practices that we want AI to put in place and automate. So I think when it comes to data is obviously the basis of everything. And we say that to so many of our clients at Deepki, but also good quality data also lends itself to the adoption of technology from a wider basis as well within businesses. If data isn't there, then it's really hard for traction and adoption across the business to really take place. So I think when it comes to sort of factors to keep in mind around data, there's sort of two things that really stand out for me. The first is around identifying the data sources and their health. It sounds really obvious, but it's really important to put your data through a boot camp when it comes to buildings, really aiming at creating and collecting data that is reliable, but also relevant to your goals in terms of what you want to see from that asset. The second element is being able to extract that data as close to the source as possible. You want to avoid manual collection and management of data. That is obviously something that typifies or has typified real estate for a really long time. But actually, if you're able to remove that and get straight to the source and bring the data into a central repository, it's really easy to then feed into AI systems and cloud systems in order to have those intelligent AI technologies.
Mm-hmm. I see Abel nodding. Would you like to add on something else as well?
I completely, because this is one of the challenges I would say that we were solving in DABBEL, right? So the stock of real estate, as you all, I think you are all interested to know, they are not ideal smart building IoT infrastructures, right? So we have a lot to do there. That's why, and also was one of the motivations, everybody was talking about the smart buildings, right? So it was like, what does it mean? So you don't really have this infrastructure. 99.9% of the buildings in the world do not have that. So everybody's trying to put some black things on top, but the infrastructure is not there. So how can we solve it, right? And one of the main points is the data, right? Because you need this data. So how we are tackling this is one of the things that we are, many people see DABBEL or our technology as, okay, we are controlling, we are providing the efficiency, but actually the onboarding of this technology in the buildings, actually one of the edge parts of DABBEL. We are able to do that in a very scalable way. And that was the key, you know, like that's this, and how, I mean, can you just identify the data source, right? So you have already the infrastructure in the building, you extract the data, and then, yeah, in many cases, if you just will train your algorithms based on what you read from the building, you will not probably have enough to really be able to provide the self-adaptation of the learning. So yeah, I couldn't agree more on Katie. That's why I was like, yes, you're right, because I was suffering the last 4 years on finding a solution for it. So this is the main point. But thanks for.
And
Katie,
just to tag on to Abel's point, sorry, because I think he made a super valid point, which is the actual onboarding of a building onto the analytics. I think even 5 years ago, and I've got wounds from doing this, it took 3 months to onboard a building onto a smart platform. So you went to an existing building and you looked at the BMS and you had 50,000 data points, none of which were named or tagged or anything. So it was a very manual process to cleanse that data to determine where the systems are, what this point is reading, and then you could operate the analytics. And I think now what the likes of Abel and his organization are doing is that process being reduced from 3 months to hours or days.
1 week.
Where
We need one to be more realistic. In average is 1 week, so maximum
1 week
per building, big building. So yeah.
And using technology to do that process, which makes it significantly more cost effective to actually operate the analytics overall, which is fantastic.
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Rick, for it. And you are right. I mean, we are still facing, just notice here, let's understand that because we are here in this panel, one of the challenges that we have when we go to buildings, they don't have internet connection. 21st century, okay? Oh, internet in my building, yeah, for anything else, like, so we can provide it, obviously we do it, but that is just to understand sometimes and what is the level where we are. So, and then we have the other part. So once we get internet in place, then we can put the connection and go into the BMS and make all of this. And yeah, we have situations that face, as you say, Will, this some kind of difficult pattern to find and to the data points and move the project forward.
That's very interesting points. Thank you, actually, all of you. In terms of reliability, so how ensure that the data is reliable? Katie, maybe you would like to say something.
Yeah, the golden ticket, right? I think really in terms of reliability of data, it comes down to that relevance piece. So I think it's really important when you're looking at your buildings and obviously you're looking to introduce smart technologies as a whole in that environment, is to really understand what are your priorities with your investments into smart technologies? What are you wanting to see in terms of the building's performance and optimization? And then on the back of that, you'll be able to really understand the relevant data sets that you need to be collecting and managing and inputting to those environments. I think, as I say, in terms of reliability, obviously AI has the ability to validate, predict, and everything in between around data sets. And that's obviously something that's really important, but you have to have a central starting point. And I think, the one thing that's probably been a challenge within the space is looking at technology solutions as pinpoint solutions rather than looking at a building in terms of its holistic data strategy, its holistic technology solution. You can't, for success and reliability, you need to move away from looking at these streams in isolation. The more you do that, the more struggles you'll have down the line, and actually your ambitions that you're looking to drive will be very difficult to realize if you're not looking from a holistic point of view. But I think the other element, which perhaps from a real estate perspective needs some work, is actually having a clear view of a common data standard for a building. I think one of the challenges we see with our clients is not only does data collection management vary from team to team within clients, it also manages from building to building. So you need to have that standard, which also allows you to have that ability to have a portfolio point of comparison view as well.
Thank you, Katie. Before we move on, just a reminder to our audience that we are running a Q&A. So get them in the chat if you want to ask our panel, and we will answer them at the end. Perfect. That sounds really interesting. So in terms of the benefits for facility managers, obviously, Katie, you mentioned it involved a lot of manual work sometimes, and Abel as well. You noted that. Will, what do you think? What would be benefits for facility managers to integrate more in terms of technologies and artificial intelligence for the buildings?
Sure. So I think when we speak about the outcomes of a building, ultimately, which falls in the facilities management domain, obviously sustainability is the key one, and the other three that we identify are around like cost efficiencies, future proofing, and then providing that inspirational experience. And I think across all of those buckets, AI really has the opportunity to increase the value that the facilities management team can offer to everyone else in the building. So I think just to provide some examples from a sustainability standpoint, working with the AI, the facilities management can gather insights that it couldn't previously. So what the AI system can do is look at all the data at once and then provide recommendations on how the facilities manager should tune the building systems to reduce the energy consumption profile of the building. I think that's one of those like common use cases where you really need that partnership between human and machine. And I think increasingly when you start to add more and more data sets into the building, the level of insight and value increases. So if you start to look at occupancy data as another stream, then the facilities management can really start to offer more value if they start to adjust building systems that use occupancy data. So you can start to have increased airflow for busier spaces. And the additional data sets that a facilities management team can hold on to, then the more and more value it can add to the users. I think the one more example I'll give is just around predictive maintenance, which I think really is about increased equipment uptime and reducing the cost. I think what a AI system or machine intelligence can do is predict when a machine is likely to fault, whether through a lagging indicator in a valve opening or anything else like that, and prompt facilities management to investigate that and maintain that system before it fails. Mm-hmm. So really working with AI, then the facilities manager can get huge benefits to increase the building experience to everyone.
Yeah, and obviously at the beginning you mentioned the sustainability, energy saving. So Abel, we see a lot of, quite a few technologies in yourself. You're working, when it comes with artificial intelligence, it usually works with HVAC systems. How does it work? Can you just briefly explain for us?
Absolutely. We are basically right now a boost for the facility management team. As Will already mentioned, with our system, with DABBEL, you are able to see plus 70% more variables and doing more things in the building that you can do just as a human being, trying to really visualize big buildings and having to be everywhere and trying to predict by yourself what is happening because your current systems are not helping you much with it. So we basically give them some kind of other glasses, but also some kind of another brain that they can some kind of delegate part of the work that they are not really able to cover, because you actually talk with them. Reality is that FM is some kind of very competitive environment, and yeah, everybody tries to maximize it, right? So they try to cover as much as they can. Most of the time, sometimes the FMs are just running around the buildings and trying to get the things solved. And the part of efficiency, taking into account that many variables cannot be seen, is that it will be like some kind of black box. So that is where we end, and we can boost and support and take this kind of work from them. So basically, if you want to be more specific, yeah, we're controlling the heating, ventilation, air conditioning in the 3 levels. So in the central level, system level, and room level, and adapting it depending on the indoor and outdoor variables dynamically and so on, without any kind of manual interaction. And that takes a lot of work from them and obviously boost the efficiency.
Okay, perfect. And Katie, how do you think, how will facility managers' expertise have to change a bit to understand how to tune and manage these artificial intelligence machine learning systems?
Yeah, it's probably a big question. I think first and foremost, it's a whole new way of working, but it's a really exciting one. So I think the industry or their roles will move from a reactive state to the ability to be a predictive one that's very dynamic. So I think there's probably a greater focus for them on the future. The predictive nature of smart buildings allows for stronger planning, but it also allows them to look at integrating more impactful longer term initiatives from a point of proactivity, which I think is really important and very welcomed from their perspectives. They're always the busiest person that I ever see in the world of property management. But I think as well, there needs to be a acceptance that smart technology and data is also their responsibility. I think historically, within the world of property, we've had people who are committed towards that data-centric culture, the promotion of technologies, when actually those are actually part of everybody's roles moving forward. And we need to sort of really own that space ourselves and really recognize the advantages it can give us in terms of our day-to-day jobs. I think there's a gap between action and knowledge. I think there's an interesting survey completed by Johnson's Controls recently, and it said that 34% of all buildings in the UK had smart technology adoption, but 99% of real estate respondents said that smart technology was essential to fulfilling their roles. So I think the appetite is there. We're just on the journey in terms of putting that in place. So we need to be open-minded to that. And I think, the facilities managers are at the heart of that change in terms of the buildings.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, okay, let's go then to what the predictions would be for artificial intelligence. There are no buildings right now is like 100% obviously autonomous. It might be in the future, but what would be the challenges then in terms of getting the artificial intelligence to be completely autonomous? Maybe, using just technology without human interaction, just as a prediction. Maybe, Will, you can add on something on this.
Yeah, so these are the questions that people get misquoted on like 5-10 years down the line. So I really have no idea what the future holds for AI. I think where we are today is in an age of implementation with the systems that we currently have. So if I was to look, 5-10 years down the future, it's really about the broad adoption of like the systems we are in today. I think increasingly what we'll see is landlords focusing more on outcomes and not like fully autonomous, because there are many examples of fully autonomous that don't actually deliver any benefits. For example, if you had someone at a front desk who was maybe an AI kind of crazy intervention, it doesn't actually deliver on any of the benefits in terms of improving the buildings like sustainability or driving cost efficiencies. My initial prediction is that at least for the foreseeable future, humans will always need to like define the objectives that AI systems will do. And I hazard the guess that if we're ever to get a future in which humans don't have that objective function, I think if we do get to a future where AI doesn't depend on a human objective, I think there's probably a broader question around what's the future of humanity as opposed to what's the future of the office.
Yeah. Katie, would you like to add on something?
Yeah, big question. So I think in terms of what the future could look like, I think in terms of where we're looking and where we read, the promise really in terms of that autonomous building is getting to a point where obviously those buildings react to their environments without any human intervention. And I think in reality, that is a long way off. I think in terms of where I see us going, I think it's really cementing the idea of smart technology. So I agree wholly with Will that human intervention is still going to be very much a present and a part of how we manage and operate and optimize buildings. But I think in the short term, it's how we incorporate smart technology across those buildings in a holistic sense, and really look at the performance of those assets. So HVAC, utilities, lifts, connectivity, everything that Abel has talked to previously. So I think that's where we are, but I think we'll start to see a shift towards partially autonomous buildings where we'll start to see a few things start to leave the human intervention piece. But as I say, I think it's the mix of smart to partially autonomous rather than that full autonomy piece, which, as Will said, is really hard to predict. And I think we're away from that.
Yeah, I agree with you. But Abel, what are your thoughts?
Thanks for that. So I agree with both of you. Adding maybe, I would like to be, because these kind of predictions, what do we really need right now? That is also a question that I have for the audience as well. What are they looking for today in this panel? Because the reality is that we can face the problem in phases, right? Maybe we are trying to go like one full stop, like, okay, everything at the same time. We need to go in phases. So we have partial also part of the portfolio already with some technology, like is BMS or building management system. They're already controlling the energy systems, they're centralized, they are already infrastructure, so we can start, and this is some kind of commercial 30% of the worldwide space. Is already a relevant place to start. And then adding more and more, I would like to tell also to everyone and remind that autonomous is not only operation. Autonomous is also from the life cycle of the property, right? So from the design to the assembly to the operation to the interaction with or experience of the users, right? So the people in the building. So there are 4 phases of it. So what we are doing right now is focusing on operation, because it's what we can really do now realistically. We're not trying to sell like, okay, we can make the complete building autonomous and do it from one day to the other. We go first, we go to the backbone, to the central, in this case, backnet, so the communication protocol, and then we override the control and put some kind of a new brain in the building using what you already have. Yeah. And this is a solution that we can use to reduce the CO2 emissions that we really need to do now. So these conversations are nice, but let's be realistic. Let's go first what we have right now, like low-hanging fruit. Once we have this solved, then we can talk about all the stuff, but I see the same. So if you want to be a little bit more futuristic, yeah, go in there. I would say starting from operation, going a little bit more with the human beings involved in operation, like predictive maintenance, trying to substitute step by step this part, then having also some kind of interconnection or interaction between different buildings, different units, because you can have automated demand response. You can also influence the distribution and the production of energy and so on. So we have a lot of layers that we can work on before we, yes, I would say before we really need to have a fully autonomous building. That's something that we don't need right now. Yeah. It will be obviously nice to have, but it's like, we are also talking about, comparison, autonomous cars, right? And not completely autonomous yet. Okay, they bring you from A to B in a much more efficient way, more comfortable way, but there are still a lot to do, and you still have to go out and put electricity right into the car, charge the car. So it's, we don't want to confuse like fully autonomous and trying to sell something that is not the reality. But yes, what I want to say with this in summary, we have the technology, we can move. It's a matter of the big guys that have all the buildings to really believe on this and move these things forward. And then I would like to, as a final message, is technology is there. We have the solution. Please, all of you guys that have the influence to have it, let's do it, because if not, in 15 years, we will have other conversations to talk about it due to the consequence that we are able now to mitigate a little bit.
Yeah, we will compare them different insights.
Exactly.
Yeah. In terms of technology, actually, so obviously we mentioned we need data. Abel, do we need anything else to integrate, like, artificial intelligence in terms of like, any IT parts in the building?
In our case, if we were speaking about DABBEL right now, we are first focusing, if we go from BACnet, so BACnet is actually the only building communication protocol certified in the world, and it's open and flexible and was created for avoiding locking effects. And actually, by the way, speaking about data, was the platform created for that. So we already have a platform that we can really use, and it's open. And so in terms of, if we have these conditions, we don't need any kind of hardware, any kind of IT. We can use this BACnet, this communication protocol, to connect with HVAC and the central systems. Then we have other protocols, and we have to add maybe some kind of gateway to convert it. And then obviously we are tackling 10, 20, 30% of the portfolio. In the meantime, as someone I think already mentioned, we need to collaborate. We need to create an ecosystem. It will not be non-individual company will solve the whole problem. We need all to collaborate in different ones in parallel as much as we can to solve this as soon as possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Also, Katie, I know one of the kind of why people are a bit concerned about the technologies is obviously data loss or cybersecurity issues. How basically the data is prevented? You know, if you lose a bit of data, is that affecting the artificial intelligence, let's say, in the building?
Yeah, I think as we said, any data loss or inaccuracy will impact AI technology. They are learning based on those data sets first and foremost. So there is an impact, but equally there is also the ability for that technology to be able to learn from historic data and also predict. So if I look to Deepki, for example, we have the ability for missing data to engage methodologies based on AI to do gap filling, for example. So we can use that information as a short-term band-aid in that scenario. But I think in terms of the queries around cybersecurity specifically, it is perhaps the leading barrier in this space. I think it causes a lot of concern, and I think that's more that you've got the items that play like security, privacy, integrity, availability of data. These are all big concerns that everyone comes to you with in these projects particularly, and that isn't just at the outset, it's a continuing narrative. So I think something that is probably missing is a benchmark that everyone can comply with in this space. I think, you know, in the last 18 months are probably testament itself. More and more components are connecting to the internet, so the risk is rising, or the perceived risk is rising. So I think as an industry, we've got to collaborate and move quite fast to look at these industry standards, which really allow us to create secure and trustworthy spaces, I guess, but equally get to that point of smart buildings in the whole. But I think it's something that obviously the laws and regulation we're really clear on. But again, it's communicating, reiterating, and making sure that there isn't a complacency. So being on top of data checks, penetration tests, for example, in terms of our space, and things like this are really important to enabling that trust. And perhaps that's something that comes more to fruition actually in terms of accessing personal data will be very important to the occupier experience, and that unique occupier experience, which I think we're all pursuing in the real estate space. And obviously that is a real area of concern for the general consumer. So I think that from my perspective is probably going to be a more challenging area that we'll see from a security appetite perspective over the coming years.
Mm-hmm. I feel, Abel, you probably get this question as well quite often. Do you have any thoughts on that too?
I think it's very important to focus on what Katie already mentioned, so I want to say the same again. I would like also to highlight there the holistic topic, as you also mentioned before. We have to go to the building and not just implement more gadgets and more stuff that is connected in a very easy way. Yeah, it's true, it's nice, but you have isolated solutions, so you need holistic. That's actually one of the things that we are doing as well. We are connected to the backbone, and we allow people, we offer it, by the way, for everyone, even we only have this product, we open some kind of uncover the data and let everyone to connect in an easy way without having any kind of locking effect. So open API for everyone, and then they can access and interact with the energy systems in the building without any hurdle. So yeah, it's not about putting more stuff, it's using the smart, and obviously having the proper security system, because it could be dangerous for everyone in the future.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've got a question for you. In terms of certification, obviously, you certify quite a lot of commercial buildings mostly. Do you think, let's say hypothetically, this autonomous building industry or technology would be beneficial for different buildings, or is mostly for commercial buildings? Is that possible for basically different buildings?
Yeah, I think any building that has, you know, data within it can benefit from these AI solutions. I think what we're seeing is, I suppose the challenge across asset classes, which is reflected in our certification, is smart buildings is just as much about change management as it is about specific technology. So while the technology is very capable of delivering like the outcomes and the analytics, there's a whole change management piece which is across asset classes around ownership of data, the relationship between landlords and occupier, all these kind of elements, and how that's contracted, what's the cybersecurity policies, what's the data privacy policies. That challenge is everywhere, and I think that's what we've tried to do within our certification, is to really reflect not just the functionality that technology needs to deliver, but also the technological foundations, which includes a lot of those like change management pieces. Right. Different asset classes, you can we can see really benefiting from like automation, right? Logistics and warehouses, another prime example where I think if you look inside a Ocado or any Amazon warehouse, there's a great deal of automation. I think that's almost a different, there's a whole another wave of automation and AI technology that we haven't really spoken about today.
Yeah, it's quite interesting, because I think previously it was quite a lot about commercial buildings, and obviously there is still, I think there's more and more conversation going on about actually domestic real estate and how to make the building sustainable. So that's very interesting. Do you have anything else to add, Katie, to this?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one, because I think if you move to sort of the domestic space as well, and new builds is a really good example, and I guess this is something we haven't touched on necessarily yet, but it is that interoperability of technology early into the design process. So I think if we look at new builds, unless a smart technology specialist is brought in early in the process, the technology is only looked at the very end of that residential new build, for example. So I think there's also a need to pull these things earlier in the process when it comes to residential, so that there is the ability for vendors to unite, because I think one of the challenges is obviously us as smart technology individuals looking at how our systems can relate to each other and integrate, and that's also a really important step in the journey and the ability for smart technology success overall, and that holistic piece that we've talked to a lot. I think interestingly, it's in the world of retrofitting, it's actually a lot easier to bring technology solutions earlier, or innovation earlier into the process. And building managers in that process tend to be very pro it, but also very safe. So going for tried and tested solutions. So I think in those scenarios, and retrofitting lends itself obviously more to the commercial space at the minute, there is a real opportunity there in terms of pushing more innovative solutions and challenging those that come into play. So I think it's a really interesting space, looking at the different asset classes and where they are in terms of introducing innovation, either in the full new development process, retrofitting, and everything in between.
Interesting. Perfect. We've got a few questions actually, so I'll start with first. Thank you very much, Keith. So Keith is asking, how does the panel fix issues of data ownership, especially when the BMS is landlord owned? By the end customer is the customer of the services, looking at running cost and sustainability. Don't know who wants to start first. Maybe Katie, you're not nodding the head.
I shouldn't have nodded, should I? No, I think really, obviously it comes back to some of the elements we talked about before in terms of following data processes, aligning to regulation. I think the element that we obviously use in Deepki is obtaining letters of authority. So we are very specific around what data we're accessing, the use of that data, and who will have access to that data overall. But I think the other element that sits around it is obviously having a really good communication strategy of the longer term impact of sharing this information and the realization of cost optimizations that we've talked to previously. So I think you could go into a lot more detail here, but I think letters of authority are the big things for us.
And also Keith is asking, do you see renegotiations in contracts as part of this? And how do you ensure security of the data to make sure it's valid and not compromised? I don't know, he would like to start.
Yeah, I think we have a lot of clients in our world who obviously use the opportunity of lease negotiations to introduce aspects such as green clauses, and with that the access to data in order to really push forward the sustainability and wider ESG agenda, which is where we focus. So yes, a lot of opportunity there, and encourage actually clients to use it. But I think, again, it needs to come with education. You can't necessarily assume that all owners and occupiers fully understand the benefits of sharing this information, and it can feel quite overwhelming. So it's important to go on a journey and not just do it out of the cold.
Maybe
I think just I think just to add to that, almost 5 years ago, if a tenant was asking a landlord to access to certain data in a multi-tenanted building, the landlord more often than not would probably say no. I think what we've seen over the last 5 years, alongside the applicability of this technology, is also the knowledge increase of actually how how a tenant could benefit by getting access to that BMS data. So I think some of the more mature conversations and that I've seen today is where there is a quite innovative landlord and innovative tenant who work together to look at the BMS, how it's segregated, and put contracts in place to manage input output of certain data. So I have seen renegotiations in contracts which specify data ownership, data sovereignty, and how an occupier can control specific aspects of the BMS in a multi-tenanted building.
Mm-hmm. Abel, do you have anything to add too?
Yeah, I think we have seen the last point with Will is true. So we have seen this in the last 5 years as well. It's a completely different picture, and I am happy for it that really tenants have this power of now asking and pushing the landlords or helping the landlords to educate themselves on these kind of technologies, because it's very necessary. Still, also agree with Katie. We need to help them to understand the benefits and the needs of these kind of technologies and moving forward. So yeah, I think we all together need some kind of still work to do and understanding of the situation, but it's definitely going in the right direction.
Mm-hmm. Okay, perfect. And Mohammed is asking us as well, do you think data alone is sufficient to enhance the artificial intelligence models' efficiency?
Data alone?
Like side data would be, efficient enough to be sufficient for artificial intelligence models.
Depends which models, right? So depends what you use and how you use it. So in DABBEL, we are some kind of boosting, right? So we're aggregating data to the data that is in the building and generating in a different way. Quite a broad question, but no. So you will need to do something and choose the right way to do it, I would say, just to keep it a little bit more neutral.
Yeah.
And I think just to add to that, I think being accurate with what data you want to collect, you can maximize the value you deliver compared to broadly looking at all data. So I think if you could add, let's understand occupancy in this space, and that's one data set you can add and then really add value. Or if certain spaces don't have set points or aren't collecting indoor or outdoor air quality, you can then add those data and really add value. So I think it can be a really iterative process to look at what data you currently have, look at what outcomes you want to deliver and how you will generate those insights, and then strategically add data points. So I think being a minimalist almost with your data is probably a better approach than trying to add everything you can all at once, where you probably won't be able to separate the noise from the signal.
Perfect. Got one more question from Arthur. He's asking, can DABBEL also increase the data potential via some kind of retrofitting, for example, through IoT technologies like LoRaWAN, or does it currently only use BMS, BAS systems to get insights about building usage? So that's for you, Abel.
Thank you for the question. Yeah, that's actually, I mentioned it very shortly before. No, we can actually enhance that. That's actually one of the points that I want to highlight today, that we are not just a product solution close that you offer there and that's all. No, we are going to the backbone and open it to actually be able to connect whatever can interact with our API in different ways can be aggregated. We are actually not really, for understanding, some kind of BMS is here, HVAC is here, we are in the middle, so we are not really in the BMS. We are over it, so in the communication protocol, meaning allowing you also to connect more data points and put it together and then boost it, as also Will mention. So for example, we have to understand with our technology, if you will add occupancy sensors, we can, on top of what we are saving, we can save up to 20%, 25% more on the HVAC part, just knowing how is the tracking of people or occupancy in the building in real time. So yeah, answer is yes, we could do it. And that's actually one of our missions is to make it easy for everyone that they come after us to they put these data points that will help also us, the owner, the environment, everyone. So, but also being careful with what we mentioned. It's not more quantity, it's also the quality.
Yeah, perfect. Well, that seems a great place to leave it today. Thank you everyone for joining us, and a big thank you to today's panel. Apologies if we've not been able to address your question. I'm sure if you direct message myself or our panel, we would be happy to respond with any answer for you. A video recording for this discussion will be released soon, so look out for that in your emails. We will also be creating a downloadable PDF featuring today's main takeaways, as well as insight from our remaining The Future of Smart Cities webinars. You'll find the link to reserve your copy in the chat right now. And if you enjoyed today's webinar, then don't forget we are running more events this week covering the future of the water industry, manufacturing, and cybersecurity. The link to attend these webinars is also in the chat. Finally, if you have an upcoming hiring project or would like to find out how CM Industrial are striving to change the way the world sees recruitment, get in touch. You can do so by sending me a direct message on LinkedIn or going to searchindustrial.com. Anyway, that's it from me. Thank you once again for attending and have a great day. Thank you.